Okay, so we will do another problem, and in this problem we will discuss about make or buy decisions. Sometimes companies will have two options for a certain product or certain materials for their product. They could either buy it by them, make it by themselves, or they could outsource it. That means they could buy from any outside company. So now we will do problem E828A, and we will see that whether for this company, which is IntelliSystem, which option is better for them. So let's read the problem first. IntelliSystems manufactures an optical switch that it uses in its final product. IntelliSystems incurred the following manufacturing costs when it produced 70,000 units last year. So they actually need one switch, optical switch, for their final product. Remember, this optical switch is not the final product. It's kind of a direct material or kind of an input for the final product. And last year they produced 70,000 units, and these are the cost items: direct material, direct labor, variable overhead, fixed overhead. So their total manufacturing costs for 70,000 unit was how much? Dollar $1,190,000. Now this year IntelliSystems actually does not know yet how many switches they will need, and they found another option that an outside company that has made an offer to sell the same switch to IntelliSystem, and that costs actually $8.50 per unit. If IntelliSystem buys the switch from the outside suppliers, the manufacturing facilities that will be idle cannot be used for any other purpose. So they have some facilities that they actually use to make this switch. If they buy this switch from outside, they could not use those facilities for any other purposes. That means for that facility, they obviously have some fixed overhead cost, and that fixed overhead cost will not be used for any other purposes. That means even they buy the switch, they don't need to produce, still they have to pay this fixed overhead, and these expenses cannot be used for any other purpose. Right, and none of the fixed costs are avoidable. They actually cannot avoid any of these fixed costs. Now, given this same cost structure, now the decision that the company needs to pay whether they should make or buy switch. So here you will see that all are cost information. So we actually will not do any income statement. We will not focus on contribution margin because we don't know the sales price of the final product or how it is related to the final product, what portion of it is of our final product. Rather, we will just focus on our cost structure. So let's analyze the cost. The name of the company is IntelliSystem, and we are analyzing whether the company make or buy. Make or buy. Buy means also outsourcing, right? Decision. So let's try to analyze the cost structure, and let's try to find out the cost per unit. Right. What if the company actually buys? What would be the cost? And we will do it for both scenarios, make, and another scenario will be buy, and both are cost per unit. So let's look at the costs. Direct material cost. You see the cost is given here 560,000. It's for these 70,000 units, but we're gonna analyze cost per unit, right? So let's try to figure out what will be the direct material cost only for one unit if they buy it. So if they, if they make it. So if they make it, the direct material cost would be how much? Total cost is 560,000, and then you have to divide it by the units, number of units they actually produced last year, which is 70,000. And if you divide it, let's do it, I think you will get $8. Right, so their direct material cost, if they make it, it will be $8. Now, what would be their direct labor cost? Direct labor, their total cost last year was 105,000 and they produced 70,000 units. So if you do this, 105 divided by 70, what's their direct labor cost per unit? I found it's $1.50. So their direct labor cost, if they make it, it's $1.05. Now let's take the variable manufacturing overhead. Their total variable manufacturing overhead is 70,000. They produce 70,000 units. That means per unit cost is dollar only. Right, now they have some fixed overhead costs. Right, so now we're gonna find out what is the fixed manufacturing overhead per unit, and it's given here. Their total fixed overhead was $455,000 and they produced 70,000 units. And let's do this little calculation. 455,000 divided by 70,000, and I found their fixed overhead cost is $6.5. So now you could figure out that what is their total overhead cost if they make it. So cost per unit is cost per unit. If they make it is, if you add all this, it's $8 plus 1.5 plus 1 plus 6.5. Let's do it. And I found it's $17. So if they make it, their cost per unit is $17. Right. So for one switch, they need to pay $17. Now what if they would buy it? So the other company actually gave them the options that they have this offer. They could buy it from another company and per switch will cost $8.50. So when they are buying it, remember they don't need to pay these manufacturing expenses, right? So they just need to pay only their purchase price per unit. That means I will show it in the buy column. Instead of spending all these 8 plus 1.5 plus 1, that means $10.50, they could buy it, right? So purchase cost from other company, right? You can write it down, and if they do it, they have to spend $8.50, right? Now remember, the assumption is that they have some facilities to make these switches, but if they buy it, they actually couldn't use this facility for any other purposes. The facility will remain idle and they could not avoid any of the fixed overhead costs. That means even they buy the switch, they still need to pay this fixed overhead cost. That means they still need to bear this $6.50 overhead cost. That means the total cost would be ultimately the purchase price per switch, which is $8.50, and they still need to incur this fixed overhead since they couldn't avoid any fixed overhead even they don't buy it. So these two together, their cost per switch will become $15. So apparently that it seems that if they buy, then they could save actually $2, right? So apparently it seems that buying the switch is the best decision. So ultimately we will measure for certain number of units whether the decision is good or bad. But apparently it's it looks that buy the switches is the better decision because it's actually it costs less, $2 less. So for our first requirement, when we are analyzing only for one unit, it looks that buying the switches is good for the company because it costs only $15 rather than making will cost $17. Now let's see requirement number 2. Requirement number 2 says that IntelliSystem can avoid one of $5,000 fixed costs by outsourcing the switches. Right. And they need to, this year, they need to actually sell 75,000 units. So they need actually 75,000 switches. Now, should the company buy or make? Now we will do the same analysis, but we will do it for 75,000 units. So let's do this similar type of income statement for 75,000 units. So here we're going to use this information, per unit information, and then we will try to use this information for 75,000 units. So let's do one income statement for 75,000 units. Right, this information is only for one unit. Now let's do it for 75,000 units. So what would be the direct material cost if they make it? So again, we will do one column for make and another column for buy. Right, let's try to figure out direct material cost. Direct material, we see that for one unit direct material cost is $8. Now we are making 75,000 units, so our total direct material cost will be, let's do this calculator, 8 multiplied by 75,000, and I got $600. Right, let's do the same thing to calculate direct labor cost. And you see here direct labor cost was $1.50. Now we are making 75,000 switches, so $1.50 multiplied by 75. Let's try to do it, and you will find that labor cost is $112,500. Now how about variable manufacturing overhead? Variable manufacturing overhead was only $1. Now let's see how much it will be for 75,000 units. So we are producing or making 75,000 units. So I multiplied it by 75,000, and of course it will be 75,000. So this is their making cost, or variable manufacturing overhead cost, if they make 75,000 switches. Now they have to also spend their fixed overhead cost. Remember, fixed overhead is always fixed, right? So although we figured out what will be the fixed overhead for one unit, but it is always fixed. So that means even though they are making 5,000 extra switches, still their total fixed overhead will be 455,000, right? So we're gonna use this total amount, fixed manufacturing overhead. So we don't need to worry about per unit and multiplying it. Rather, we're gonna use total fixed overhead, because we know that the total fixed overhead means the fixed overhead for a certain range of productions. So even if they produce 60,000 units, 70,000 units, 75,000 units, they will have to spend all these fixed expenses. So let's see what would be the total cost for these 75,000 units. Right, so let's add all the numbers. 600,000 plus 112,500 plus 75,000 for 55,000, and I found their total cost will be 1,242,500. That means if they make the switches, their total cost will be this much. Now, how about if they buy the switches? So we know if they buy the switches, then they have to pay $8.50 for one switch, right? So purchase cost or buying cost of the switches, purchase cost from another company will be how much? It's actually, it will be that $8.50. That's the deal, right? The other company is offering $8.50 for each switch. So $8.50, and they need how many switches? They need 75,000 switches. If you multiply this, the total will be how much? Let's do it. 8.5 multiplied by 75,000, and I found it's 637,500. Right. So that's the cost they have to pay if they purchase it from another company. Now the company also need to pay the to buy it. So your total cost for 75,000 switches will be 637,500. But remember, if you buy the product, still you have to pay some portion of your fixed overhead cost. But you could avoid $105,000 fixed cost. So if you make the buying decisions, then your fixed overhead will be lower by 105,000. That means we could identify it like this way: fixed overhead if purchase is made. Fixed overhead will be how much? Right now, under making options, their fixed overhead is $455,000, but they could avoid fixed overhead by $105,000. So their fixed overhead will be, if you subtract 105 from 455, it will be $350,000. So under buy option, your total cost will be this purchase cost of those 75,000 switches, which is 637,500, and your fixed overhead cost 350,000. And if you add both, then you will find that under buying option, your total is 987,500. And you see that if you compare these both options, make versus buy, if you figure it out, you will see that buying option, your cost is actually lower. So it seems that it's better for the company if they buy those switches.